Hey everybody, Jake here. So today I want to talk about the fork on the Honda Trail. I have a ton of miles on this bad boy by now. I've been doing lots of cool adventures. Thank you to those of you that have been watching. But one of the things that I've noticed is that my fork is super soft, and I'm not the only one. The Facebook groups and other forums on the internet have all confirmed the same thing. Honda made this fork especially soft. The reasoning behind that I'm not quite sure, but when I'm off-road, I get a clanging noise that sounds like I'm bottoming it out, and I want it a little bit stiffer because I'm carrying gear with me when I'm doing these trips. I have a trip coming up with my father, so I really wanted to make sure that I addressed this prior to that trip, and so I found a way to do that. But first I want to show you what I'm talking about with the fork being soft. So when I say the fork is too soft, what I mean is that it's compressing too easily. What I initially thought was the problem was the weight of oil that they're using. I thought that the 10 weight oil that comes stock from Honda might have been too thin of an oil. So what I did was I actually pulled the forks off of the trail at a previous interval, emptied the oil, and added a higher weight. I added a 15 weight instead of the 10. That has made it a little bit better, but what I'm experiencing with the bottoming out looks like this. And you can see that there's a ½ inch to an inch of sag in the travel of the bike overall. So when I hit any sort of bump, I'm getting a really loud clanging noise, and that, like I said, sounds like I'm bottoming out the fork. So I want to show you what I found to replace that, and I'm going to install it and show you how I do that, and then I'm going to review it and see if it actually works, take it out on a ride. So this is what I found to fix my problem. This is the Chimera billet aluminum top front fork cap with preload from Steady Garage. When I bought this, it was about $69, but I think that they might be on sale right now. Don't quote me on this, it'll depend when you're watching the video. But basically, this cap is identical in the threads and the size of the head up top, but it adds about a ½ inch to an inch here. So it's acting as a volume spacer, like on a mountain bike fork. So all it's gonna do is take up more space, and a lot of people will tell you to do this with PVC pipe. The reason I decided to go this route instead was, one, it's beautiful. I mean, look at this thing. It's nice black. You can get it in anodized red or in chrome, whatever matches your bike best or whatever you want to match your bike with. And I did this because I'm riding in the National Forest a lot, and I'm just afraid that if I put PVC in there, regardless if it's the right size or not, at some point I would break it. And if I broke it, I would be down the river without a paddle. So this was a better option for me, but you do you. The principle is the same. I will post a link to this down below so you can pick this up for yourself, but that's what it looks like. I'll show you what it looks like next to the stock cap in just a minute. So let me show you how to get the stock one out and what the difference between them is. So the bolt that we need to remove is the fork cap, right? Which is right here. As you can see, because I'm a tall rider, I spun the handlebar clamps around. So now it prevents me from getting a bit in there all the way. So I have two options. I can loosen the handlebar mount up top here, these 4 bolts, and see if I can turn the handlebars in a way where I can actually get a bit on them, although I won't be able to get an entire wrench on it most likely. Or I can remove these 4 bolts and let the handlebars hang for the time being. And so I think that that is the route that I'm gonna take. So give me just 1 second here while I remove the handlebars so I can get to the fork caps. Okay, so I've removed the handlebars, and it's really important to mention that before I took a silver Sharpie and I marked on the handlebar and on the faceplate, just a tiny little line so that I can line them up when I reassemble everything, and that'll help me ensure that I have them exactly where they were before I took them off, and that everything is still centered. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove the two 17mm fork bolts right here, fork caps. And to do that, I think I'm probably gonna have to loosen this guy on the side because that is compressing the actual, the rod here. So I think if I loosen this, it's gonna make loosening this a bit easier. So that's a 6mm and that is a 17mm socket. So stand by while I take these off of here and I'll show you the difference between the stock cap and the aftermarket cap with the preload. All right, so I've removed the stock fork cap. Like I said, I loosened this 6mm bolt here and I loosened the 17mm socket and removed the fork cap itself. And there it is. You can see the threads and the cap, what it looks like. This feels like a steel bolt, but what I'm gonna put on it is aluminum, and this is the difference between the two. So you can see this is substantially bigger. Now the fork cap threads are exactly the same. It's the same thread pitch and everything. But what's important here is that we very carefully remove this O-ring, because this is gonna have to go on the new bolt. You can order one. Mine was not crushed or anything, so I'm gonna reuse mine. I'm sure I'll have somebody comment and say, no, you can't do that. I'm gonna do it. So you can choose how you do that. I just removed it with my fingers. I would not advise using a pick or anything, as you might get yourself into some trouble that way. The only other thing that I'm going to do is add just a tiny bit of anti-seize to these threads, because I'm putting an aluminum bolt into a steel rod, or, you know, it's gonna be aluminum on steel is what I'm saying. So what I wanna make sure that I do is put anti-seize on so that this does not get stuck in there down the road when it is time to service the fork. So stand by while I grab some anti-seize. All right, so now I have some anti-seize on the threads here. And again, this is important so that the aluminum fork cap bolt, this is the aftermarket with the preload or the volume spacer version of it, does not seize inside of the steel fork leg. So now that I have that on there and I have the O-ring from the original fork cap bolt, or a replacement if that's what you decide to do, a brand new one, I can take this and I'm gonna just push it in. There's gonna be some resistance because of the spring. And what I wanna do is I wanna just get it started. I'm not gonna put this in all the way. I'm gonna get it in just a few threads so that it doesn't pop out and damage anything. But I'm going to tighten that up all the way once I get the other side taken care of as well. So it'll be just 1 second until I have the other one out and some anti-seize on those threads as well. Okay, so now with that fork bolt removed as well, I have the other aftermarket one. I've already put the O-ring from the stock fork cap on there, and I have a little bit of anti-seize. So now I can push this one in as well. Again, there's gonna be resistance, and I wanna just bring this in a few threads so that it does not pop out and damage anything. Okay, so now I can take my 17mm socket and I can get these guys tight. And then as soon as I have these tight, I can tighten these back up as well. And then from there, we can put the handlebars back on. and then we can test it out and see if we notice any difference right from the get-go with these. If we look really carefully, we can see the silver line that I was talking about that I drew with a Sharpie. Just a tiny little dab on the bars and the faceplate so that I can get them aligned correctly. So what I'm gonna do right now to make this a little easier on myself is I'm gonna take 2 bolts and just slide them in here. Make sure that they're aligned correctly and that they thread into the holes. There we go. And so I'm going to use 2 to just kind of get this in place and hold it. But what I'd like to do is use a little bit of anti-seize on these bolts as well, just because I have it out, and I think that that's a good idea for these as well. You really can't go wrong using that stuff as long as you use it in moderation. And I'm applying it to the bolts with just a wax brush, in case you want to do this yourself. You can see that with these bolts, there was no thread lock or anything on them. So that's why I figure some anti-seize would be a good idea. So I have everything on and back together. And what I noticed immediately when I pulled it off the center stand is that it didn't compress immediately like it had before. It was a little bit firmer. So I'm thinking that those new fork caps took up about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch of play that had existed in the travel of the fork. I'm hoping that it's going to make a difference on the dirt roads, but there's only one way to tell, and that's going to be to actually take it out and test it. But we're going to have to do that in the morning. So stay tuned here. I'm going to take this thing out and we're going to put it to the test.
Okay, everybody. I didn't get to test this the same day that I installed the fork caps because it started to rain, and then it rained all the next day, and I just washed and waxed the trail and I didn't want to take it out. But I ride to and from work every day. I know where all the bumps are. And so I've been purposely hitting as many bumps as possible. And here's what I can tell so far without doing a proper off-road ride. These fork caps make a huge difference. The preload caps are perfect. It has raised the front end, so it's more comfortable for me because I'm taller. And anytime I hit any sort of bump, I don't immediately feel like I'm gonna bottom it out. It doesn't feel like it's bobbing up and down. It's very comfortable. It feels really good. It feels the way that a fork should feel. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's firm without being too stiff, and it's supple without it being too soft. So it's right in the sweet spot for me. And I mean, I can tell the gap I can tell I waited so that I could wave to those people. I could tell that the gap right here between my knee and the handlebar is actually a bigger distance than it was before. So it feels nice to have this front end lifted again. I was looking at the rack earlier And I was like, man, the rack looks like it's kind of tilted weird. And I was like, oh no, that's how it's supposed to be. This fork was super sagged out before. So it's a lot better. I'm really happy with it, and I'll definitely give more input on it after my first real off-road ride.